Welcome to this weekend conversations. Uh, Today I want to talk about DPDP, which is Digital Personal Data Protection Act. This was notified on 14th of November 2025, and there has been this act, DPDP Draft Act, which was first revealed in 2023, and since then there have been deliberations on it, and that there has been a journey of how we reach this place, and it's available. You can check out, you can read more about it, that how gradually we progress towards this act. Yes, very much inspired by GDPR, but there are certain nuances. For instance, this act is only regarding data that is collected or maybe stored digitally, while GDPR is embraces all kinds of data. Similarly, there are some more differences between the two. Uh, I want to specifically talk about how and what it means for startups. You know, the act itself categorizes, I would say, organizations into two. One is significant data fiduciary, and other is data fiduciaries. So, significant data fiduciary is a very, a large organization which collects enormous volume of data, and very likely you could say all these social media apps, uh, banks, and similar kind of large organizations which collect volumes of data, they will be classified as significant data fiduciaries, while as other set of organizations will be data fiduciaries, including startups. Now, the purpose of kind of classifying organizations into two is obvious. Uh, the government understands that STFs have a different kind of responsibility because they have a lot of personal data, and the data fiduciaries relatively have lesser volume of data, lesser amount of personal data, so there can be a different set of compliances for them to follow. However, while I see, when we go through the act and we try to decode and what it means for everyone, is that for SDF, significant data fiduciaries, there is an establishment cost. There is an implementation cost attached to it. For instance, they have to have now, officers, compliance officers. They have to get third-party audits done. So, there are compliance costs for them. For startups and data fiduciaries, yes, government has uh, kept this relatively, I would say, less burdened, where you don't have to go for these kind of compliances. But the issue is not just of the compliance, the issue is of the what are the punitive actions when it comes to the say breach, for instance. Now, in that case, there is no distinction between an SDF or a DF, data fiduciary. uh, the breach cost could go to 200 to 250 crores kind of penalty. Now, for significant data fiduciaries, large organizations, maybe not an issue, and I'm sure they have a very good legal support also available at their disposal. So that could negotiate well if in case of such breach. But imagine what's going to happen with startups. Startups don't have that kind of support, they don't have that kind of legal access, so it could be very detrimental for startups, even if a single data breach is reported or established that it has happened through them. So startups also need to be very, very careful and critical of personal data now, and that is where DPDP is a significant change in the entire ecosystem now, which startups also need to think about. See, in today's business, especially for startups, because most of the startups are digital first or digitally enabled, so there is a process in their operations where personal data is collected digitally and stored digitally, and that is where the DPDP gets or becomes relevant for them. So, a couple of things and challenges I would want to talk about here. One is, see, it is very difficult for startups to, uh, you know, implement it, because see, yes, there are exemptions. The act does provide for exemptions for startups, but number one, they're not automatic, so government will notify them. And there are categories, which government could notify that, okay, these kind of startups are exempted, but it is not automatic, so it will be notified. That is one issue. Second, I don't personally feel that government will take a view here that, okay, startups having, say, a revenue of up to 5 crores, a revenue of 3 crores, 2 crores are exempted, because see, personal data breach, at the end of the day, the purpose of this entire act is to protect and safeguard personal data of consumers, or citizens of the country. So, you know if it kind of gets breached by a company which is having a revenue of 1 crore, or a company which is having a revenue of 100 crores, it is meaningless, because the whole purpose is that the data doesn't get breached. So I don't think government will take this kind of approach, that where they will be kind of, okay, startups up to certain crores of revenue are exempted. So let's see how government takes it up and what kind of exemptions are there. On a what looks prima facie, that yes, we all have to get prepared for it. We have to understand, first of all, I think there is a data anatomy that every organization, every startup will have to look at, understand what is the data anatomy, how is data flowing, where from data is flowing, what kind of tools are being used. One of the challenges with startups, especially the, I would say lower tier startups, is that, we may not be very technologically advanced. The tech understanding will be limited. There may be usage of third party tools, and they may not be very credible at times, because the initial, I think, approach everywhere is cost cutting, and trying to save for every penny. So you look for various options. You go for third party services. You engage a lot of third party tools, services, um, while designing your product, and you somewhere trust them that, okay, beyond this point you have to just trust them, and feel that, okay, they will not be responsible for any issues later on. So you use these kind of tools and applications out there. But now, a startup will have to think twice, thrice, that can I go for this tool? Will it be able to uh, give me that kind of, I would say, comfort, and that kind of assurances that, yes, we are not going to face any kind of data breach because of this tool or this service, which we may be using in our entire operations to, and through which maybe some of the personal data might be flowing of customers. So that's, very, very critical to look at, that who are we now using and partnering with, as regards these third party tools and applications. The second thing, as I said, is, I think, data anatomy, very important for every startup to understand what is the kind of data structure, uh, what all, endpoints, touch points is the data flowing through, where from is the data coming, what kind of personal data are we capturing, how are we storing it, where are we storing it. All of that, now needs to be thought through, and I think every organization will have to now create a data map to understand and, be clear about it, that how and where the data is flowing from. So that's the second thing. The third issue, which makes it at times very challenging and, counterintuitive, is, see, today's businesses day and age is a kind of a different environment. I may be collecting data today for purpose A, but with the kind of AI interventions, AI use cases, the purpose of, the same data might be useful tomorrow for another intervention. Simply put, maybe today I might use a data for lead generation. Tomorrow, the same data, you, because of some AI tool, might be useful for, say, demand assessment or something else. Now, that is like again a challenge that how can a startup foresee that what kind of use cases this data is going to serve? And I need to take all those kind of consents, you know, at the beginning. Or I'll have to generalize the consent mechanism, which means that, I'll be asking my customers that you are allowing me to use this data for everything under the sun, which again is not a wise thing, and which is not the purpose of consent mechanism. Then, entire consent process, and you know, the genesis of consent based mechanisms is flawed. So it again becomes a challenge that how, as a startup, I'm just visualizing this that, okay, today I'm collecting data for purpose A, taking consent from my customers. And tomorrow, in due course of time, I realize that, okay, this same data can be used for another purpose. Now, do I again reach out to my customers? That's what the law maybe requires, that I have to again reach out to customers and tell them that, okay, now I have found another use case of your data. So, can I use this? Are you giving me the consent? So it becomes a kind of, I would say, impractical. You can't do it every time. And you can't obviously, have a generic umbrella kind of consent from the consumers that you will be using the data for everything. So that is, I think, an implementation issue out there, which again, we collectively as startup ecosystem will have to think and understand more, that how we can kind of navigate through such situations. uh, Maybe one more thing which we need to look at, that doing all of this, whether it is data anatomy, data audit, although, data audit is not mandatory for startups, but I think no startup can do without a data audit now. You'll have to do this data audit, create this data anatomy, take up, understand what kind of tools are you using, are they really reliable now, can you trust them, or maybe you'll have to change your, you know partners from whom you're taking tools, or maybe you'll have to think the other way, that, okay, we'll have to go in house, we can't now rely on third parties. So, all of this at the end of the day is adding a cost. So the data this, even if there aren't any, I would say, explicit or written out mandatory kind of things for startups, or, data fiduciaries, I would say. Even then, there are costs associated to comply with the law. And, some assessments we have done, they go as high as maybe 30-35% of what it is today. So that's another challenge out there. So it does have a financial burden also on startups. So how are startups going to navigate through it? That's one more issue out there. Well, this is on the negative side, but on the positive side, I feel there is an opportunity for startups also. There could be a startup which could be just, solving all those issues for startups. That how does a startup now comply with the DPDP Act? So that could be a startup in itself. So yes, that's on the positive side. Well, let's have more discussion on DPDP Act as it unfolds. We are just, I would say, just a week into its implementation, and everyone in the ecosystem is trying to decode and understand more about it. But let's have more discussion on it, more discourse on it, and try to find out that how we are going to navigate through it, and at the end of the day serve the purpose. Yes, I think we are all for privacy. I don't want my data, personal data, to be out. So similarly, I should be having same respect and regard for my customers data. I don't want my customers data also to be out. So that, I think, that endeavor should be there, that effort should be there, but at the same time we'll have to also figure out how we are navigating all these points through. Well, that is what I had to share in today's weekend conversations. We'll be with you next week with another topic. Till then, have a great time.